Hey guys, welcome back out in the garage. Today I want to talk about, well, it's a subject that's been talked about 1,000 times over, but I'm going to bring it up again anyway, and that's the oiling system basically on these 335 series, the 351 Clevelands and the M's, the tall decks, okay? So, Michael reached out to me. He's doing a couple of blocks and he wanted me to kind of refresh his memory from an old video that I made on the old YouTube and on the oil mods and stuff, because he's going to do his own. So I thought I would just do a basic little talk on it for the guys that are wanting to do their own little mods and stuff, themselves, to save money and everything, and do as much of their build as they can without sending out as much. Because that's the way I've always been as far as trying to teach people, the budget guy. A lot of these videos and stuff you watch, you gotta have a wallet, okay? When they're showing you all this cool stuff, it's not cool when you have to pay for it. When you see some of the pricing, it's outrageous, right? So this is gonna be towards the guys that have more of the thinner wallet and want to keep the budget down and do a lot of their own work, okay? And they're not all pro stocks or NASCAR or nothing like that. You're just a hot street, or you're a pro street, or a mild drag, or a, whatever. So, but you're not like Superman, okay? So a lot of these oil mods that the guys talk about is because they went beyond what I believe Ford really intended, okay, originally. Okay, I mean, the Clevelands, they call them a high RPM engine, but none of them came out high RPM from factory. Okay, the way they were set up, they weren't, well, how can I say it? They weren't wrote up, okay, this is your new car off showroom floor and you can go 7,500 RPM. No, they were rated a lot lower, okay, at their horsepower rating and everything. And their oiling system worked fine, okay? So I just want to kind of throw in some stuff, and I have shown probably about every mod there is for these things, but I personally only do maybe half of it, if that, because I don't build any of my personal engines to go high RPM as what some guys love these Clevelands to do. 7,800 is like my number. If I want to build myself a high RPM, it's like 7,800. So a lot of people, 7,800 ain't nothing, okay, for these Clevelands. But that's me, and that's why I don't have oiling issues, I think, like some do. They try to go beyond that, so they got to do all this stuff. So by doing all that, and they spread it out that you got to do this and do that, it starts to cause the budget builder to need thinking they got to do all that because they're scared. I mean, a lot of people are scared to death of the oiling system of Cleveland because of all the BS that people talked about, okay? So I'm just going to show a couple little, they're really not even mods, okay? They're not even mods, just more of the cleaning when you go to check your block, you clean it and everything, and after you get it back from the machine shop and you got all your machining done, there's some steps you still need to do. And then there is a couple little mods, but I'm not going to do none of the mods on this block, okay, right now. I'm just going to use it as a dummy block. This is the block with the main caps that are incorrect, and we did find the main caps. They're having them shipped, okay. They think they found the set that goes with this block, so they're shipping them to me. So I'm just going to use it to show a few things to talk about the oil mods. And again, a lot of these oil mods that I may bring up, I don't do on my personal stuff, but I've done them on, on other people's stuff because that's what they requested done, or that's what they wanted done, and we do it, okay? So anyway, so basically, when you get your block back from the machine shop, and let's say it's already bored and honed and decked and whatever the machining was doing, but you're doing the assembly, so that means you have to do the final clean as well. So we all know you get big long bore brushes that go through everywhere. they're in the bath and everything. But what I want to talk about is something that I've talked about on my other video, is like the oil holes, okay? I don't know well the camera. Let me just move this forward. And down. I can't tilt the camera because last time I tried that, then it makes the whole screen move sideways when you're trying to watch the video. Okay, so you have the oil feeds right here, right? Let me just give you a pointer. Right here, see these? Okay, this is what feeds the main off of that gallery right there. So you want to go through these, okay? Well, a lot of times we just use a bore brush and stuff, but they are 5/16. So I always recommend, finding a 5/16 reamer or even a drill bit, a long drill bit, and you're gonna run through there all the way through, as far as it'll go. With, of course, on the drill, and you don't worry about, you're not gonna hurt that galley at all, especially with a reamer. And it's gonna pull out. You're gonna find stuff. It's gonna be stuck to it. It could be anything, okay? Carbon buildup, oil builds up, some of the cleaning stuff can still be stuck in there. So you're gonna run these through all the 5/16 holes, okay? With your reamer, you're gonna go back and forth. Some guys actually drill those out bigger. Okay, so once that'll break everything loose before you start using the brush and high pressure hose. Quarter inch, okay? For the cam, okay, you're gonna use these. You're gonna bore all the way through, and you can see I can't even get that all the way in there. Oh yeah, there's crap in this one. Oh, that one went through. Okay, oh yeah, look at that, just showing, I already got something on there. So, you're gonna bore those through, okay? As part of knocking all the little crap out. Now, this front hole is 1/2 inch. So, you get a 1/2 inch reamer. And you can buy reamers, or you can use long drill bits, and you're gonna go through. Okay, this is gonna go through. This is 1/2 inch. That's 1/2 inch. Okay, on the side here, does it show? You got this one here. See how far it went in? You can see the angle. I want to talk about that here in a little bit. So you got that one to run through. You got this one to run all the way through. And oh yeah, look at the crud on there just from doing this. That's crazy. See, in this block, like I say, even though your blocks look good like this one, they can still have all this in it. Look at that crud I just pulled out just doing it by hand, wasn't even drilling it. So basically, you're gonna go through and use the reamers, and hit all those holes that I just showed you. Okay. Okay, now, since we're on this subject right here, here's where your oil filter adapter goes. Okay. Before you remove it, if the shop didn't remove it, you look in through there and you're gonna see the oil hole, okay? Let me see if I can blow this up. It didn't blow up. What's the deal? Hold on. Okay. The oil hole isn't straight in like this. It's way over there. I mean, it's tucked underneath there. So what I do, and never had a problem with this. So before you take this out, let's just say it's in there, get a flashlight or whatever, and you look in there, because of course this goes straight in. You look in there and you find that hole way over here. And before you remove this, get a punch and a hammer. And let me see if I can show it. Let me back that back off. Hold on, bear with me. It won't focus. Anyway, I don't know why it won't focus. I have the worst luck with cameras. You put a little punch mark. I have a little punch mark right there. You can't see it though. And that's in line with that hole over here, okay? And I take this out. Then, where that punch mark is, you would lay this back. Just this side. Leave all this round. Leave it. Don't even touch it. Just lay that back to when you screw this back in, that laid back part is more over that hole, okay? Let me see if I even have a... Here we go. I do have one. See, it looked more like that. And so instead of like that, see the difference? That's over the hole more. So when it goes in, it still goes straight against this side, but it tries to get oil to the feed hole over there. So, because a lot of guys, you know, they run a big old adapter. You know, you've seen some guys run those. And so you can run a big filter and everything. They run this big adapter on there. It looks more like this. That's not one of them though. But it's like that thread. And so they believe it gets more in there, but it still has to go in that little hole. So for the guys that want to run the big filter, I actually make these. I make these so that you can actually keep your stock. You can actually keep your stock when, in case you can't find a big filter, you can put another filter, regular filter back on it, or you can go ahead and screw this on. See, and then you can run the big filter. I mean, so that's real ideal, but you don't have really that whole deal is the filter itself is why some guys say, well, I've got more pounds now with that bigger filter, but it doesn't, it's all it has to do with the anti-drain back and the pressure relief valves and all that good stuff inside the filter is why it seems to add like 7 or 8 pounds or whatever they claim. So when we made those spacers, those adapters to go in the stock one, it did the same thing, okay? So it's the filter. It's not changing this because that hole is still 1/2 inch right there. It's still the same. Even if you use the drill it open a little more, it's still tucked way underneath here. And I always feel you want that hole tight. See, so since the hole is to one side, you want that cavity here, the cavity itself, to stay small, okay, like a combustion chamber. They just have it big because they had to drill it for those big threads. So they had to drill a big hole, but the actual hole being over here on the side. So by using the factory adapter, it fills up that hole a lot. Cause remember how it's real thick and just has a small hole. So by using that factory one and laying it over, at least you're over the hole more, but you got the cavity filled up and it's not in there bouncing around and stuff. Those other adapters are just straight through. Okay, they're not thick or nothing. They're thin and they're straight through. But either way, whatever you want to use. Okay, so there's that. This big hole here, same thing. A lot of people plug this. I never plugged this big front hole. Your bearing plugs it as it is and actually offsets. So that was another thing I want to talk about was bathtubing the bearing. So there's probably going to be a few things I'm going to talk about throughout time when I'm doing the actual builds that I'll actually show it, you know, like the bathtubing and stuff. I'm not going to bathtub one right now. But if you lay your main bearings in, the holes are offset. A lot of the holes are offset. So if you bathtub the bearing, it'll actually be like opening the hole. Okay, well this big hole, a lot of people block it off. Theory is too much oil going to number 1 and number 5 main or whatever, or rod. Okay, well I have theories on that too. So I never do this, okay? They say to block this completely 100% and go off of this one, okay? Because it goes through here, this will oil the cam, and this will oil the main. But remember, this main still has to oil number 1. Anyway you look at it, number 1 rod, okay? And that means this oil that's coming in from the pump is oiling here and here and not actually and it's going to here and then down to here to the lifters. They don't want you to go up here, but you're relying on this little guy right here. They say to open it to 5/16. So even when you open it 5/16, the bearing's still over it. Okay, it's still cut off. So you still need to bathtub that to actually make it even efficient. So with this here, it's not hurting nothing having extra oil, because remember, that oil needs to get to those rods, and what comes out, they say too much comes out the sides. We need the oil to come out the sides. You need to get it back to the pan for cooling. You need that oil to come out the sides to splash on cylinder walls, wrist pins, cams. It's not hurting nothing. People get too high on the windage deal, okay? A lot of windage, that's great for like circle track, high RPM when you're constant holding RPM stuff. But if you're gonna run a quarter mile in 8 seconds, 9 seconds, the windage is just starting to get that windage to where it's really gonna affect you a lot, I believe. So, and I've talked to guys that said they put windage trays on and actually really didn't notice any different, because they're on and off too fast, okay? Like on the street, and stuff like that. So, but again, it's a preference thing. But this here, and then if you look at the rotation of the crankshaft, okay, and then your leading edge of your oil holes, it gets to this big one before it ever gets to this one. But if you're blocking this off, now it has to go to here, okay, and they're already complaining about the oiling as it is on the rods and mains on these things, but yet here you are blocking this off, okay? And which is kind of comical, because some manufacturers will sell you things to restrict oil in some area to put more to the mains, and add these lines and stuff to put more to the mains. Then after you do all that, they'll sell you a product that tells you to block off the main, okay? So it makes, no sense. If you want to put a plug in there and then maybe put a little hole in the middle of it, that I'm all for, okay? And that's something that's been done. I've got friends that's done that, okay? And it matches the bearing, okay? So anyway, that's the deal with that hole there. Now, let's see. That. Okay, let's just talk about other little things. Oil restrictors. Okay, let's talk about oil restrictors. I don't even know if I was even in the camera the whole time. Let me back that up a little bit. Oil restrictors. Some guys are for it, some guys are against it. And all they are, these little set screws. Little set screws with a hole in the center. And basically, you would tap that little galley right here for the cam and screw that in. Tap this one, screw that in. Same all the way down. And that reduces the oil that goes through the cam, since you don't need as much on the cam journal, and that would put more to the mains, okay? So this has been around for decades and decades, okay? That's probably one of the most popular, talked about throughout the years before the more later stuff came out and people started finding other ways of doing whatever. But this has been around probably one of the longest, has been restrictors in the mains, okay? Now, not to jump subject too far forward, this is a bigger plug, which is going to go for the left bank. Okay, the left bank oiling back there, the block's upside down. So And that's what oils the lifters, that bank. All that bank does is oil the lifters and then that top end. So they say use this plug here with a small hole. So I think it's a 3/16 hole. But never do it with a hydraulic. With hydraulic flat tappet or hydraulic roller. You never reduce that. Okay, well we have, and successfully. Okay, we've done it. Okay, because sometimes we may want to do a switch from a hydraulic to a solid throughout the season or whatever, and we don't want to go in there and have to tear it all down to put a plug in there. So we've done it and we got away with it. They say never do that because it won't supply the oil right. Okay, now I'm going to jump forward. Just remember that. Bushings, lifter bushings. I run no lifter bushings in none of my stuff, but I've installed lifter bushings. They say that is the #1 fix for the Clevelands. It's a must for everyone, okay? And what it is, basically, your machine shop is going to machine the lifter bores. I don't know if I can even see them, but okay, the lifter bores. They machine the lifter bores, and then these get pressed in. These get honed for your new lifters or your lifters, present lifters. And then there's a little hole. They don't come with any hole at all. You have to put a hole in, of your choice. But most guys go with this 16 thousandths hole, a little tiny 16th. And that one actually looks bigger than a 16th. But anyway, they put a little tiny 16th hole. Okay? They said that's what you need. They put it through here. And they put them through here. But they don't want you to put this 3/16 hole in this one plug, but they want you to run 8 of these on that side with little tiny holes. And it's okay for hydraulic and hydraulic roller, but that's not. That struck me kind of funny. So the same people that tell you don't do this, they tell you to do this. Now, the whole original idea of a bushing is actually, I call it a repair. It's for a lifter bore repair or angle or straightening. Alignment, okay, is what these were actually used for originally. Okay, is what it really is for. We use them. They put the small hole there. They say to reduce oil to the top end so you don't starve the bottom, okay? And it puts more oil to the crank. To the main, so to the crank, because you're only got this little hole here. You know, you're not flooding all this. Okay, and when you shoot out a lifter, the oil pressure won't drop instantly. Shoot out a lifter, you got other problems anyway, right? So that's that. I don't even want to hear that part, but that's what they claim. All right, we just don't hear that too often. So that's the idea there. So if that's the idea there, you really don't need to do this side. This side is only controlled by that guy. That's it. This whole side is done from the 5th main. From the bottom of the 5th main bearing, it starts to oil this side. Really, this is not necessary then. Okay, it really isn't. If you're using it for oil control, the top end, people are starving the top end. Okay, and I can't believe some of they take away so much oil, and you need oil to cool your valve springs. You need oil to cool the rocker arms and keep them lubed up. They'll put these guys in. They'll put restrictor push rods in, restrictor whatever they can think of, and to where they have just drips on top, and your valve springs won't last, and nothing's gonna last when you do that. Okay, you need as much oil to the top as you can get up there to cool things, but still remain enough oil in the oil pan. Okay, another thing I've never done is pump them dry, and I use high volume oil pumps. Okay, so all these leaks people talk about, they're not really hurting anything because all those leaks is getting back to the pan and it's cooling. And all those leaks is what cools the inside of the block and everything else. So this is a great idea if you're maybe a ultimate, it's max effort and it's for this and that. But if you're a daily driver, hot street, you're not going to be seeing no 7,000 all the time or nothing. It's not. I don't believe it's mandatory like people say. It's not. You want to keep, if you're going to be putting lots of miles on, you want to keep the cooling as much as you can on top, as much cooling as you can on top. Okay. So I never run these. I've installed them because that's what they wanted, but I don't run them at all. Okay. Now, going to that lifter deal. They say the oil goes in the galley, okay, and it feeds the cam first. I've heard that a million times. It feeds the cam first before it feeds the main and rods. Incorrect, okay? Then I watched, I don't know how many YouTube videos, they're just showing you a diagram and they're saying it's going like this. It's going up, feeding here, feeding this main, it moves over, it goes up, feeds here, feeds this main, goes over. No, no. This block, when you fire it up, and once that needle right here says 60 pounds, 70 pounds, 80 pounds, whatever, this block is full, and it stays full. It never goes into a big whatever comes around and goes like this. And that's what's throwing people off because it messes with your brain, okay? So this block is full. So it's constantly got oil pressure against it. It's coming out the leaks. But it's got oil pressure at all times. So it's flushing down, it's cooling things, but it's still going. So with that said, I don't have cam bearings in here. Oh, that's another thing. A lot of people got away with, don't use these anymore because they go with groove cam bearings instead. Okay, here's a quarter groove cam bearing. This is the ones I make and I run, and I have them in some blocks out there. You'll look, it's just a quarter of a groove. Here's your oil hole. And that's it, all right? It's not a full groove. Okay, there is a couple of places that make full groove, but this is a true oil restrictor. And the whole idea of this is when this is sitting like this is your oil, this will be where your pinch point and oil wedge and stuff is. So you want to move the oil hole, okay? So, well, depending on how you want to look at it in the block, let's say like this. So now it's going to oil here to the hole, okay? Now the pinch point, see, you have full surface. And what's good about the quarter groove is now you have the full footprint, see? A full footprint all the way around until you just get there. And that's a true restrictor because it can't go nowhere else. So whenever it can't do anything else, it's restricting and putting more to the mains. What we found with the full groove, it's always constantly, can always move. It can always go around, move. So it's really not restricting, but you are moving the hole. So you're still getting the benefit of moving the hole on a full groove, but you lose footprints, and then you have all that oil pressure behind the bearing. And we have found if your bearing journals aren't really nice, they can leak out the sides, okay? And maybe start to wash the backside of the bearing a little bit. So if you want to run a groove bearing, that's fine, okay? But this is the one that I can offer is this one here. It's a quarter groove is what I call them. Okay, it's just a nice little bearing, and you can move, that way you can move the hole over so you have a full footprint on the cam down there. Because it's pushing down like this, which is opening this side and letting the oil in, still letting good oil in. Okay, depending on which way you want to look at it, however you have your block sitting. We usually say put that at 3 o'clock. Okay, so So that's that. So now let's go back to this. The mains are actually oiling, you could say, the same time as the cam or even before the cam, because the oil port is basically the same one. So the oil galley that oils the main is going right into the main, which right next to that is the cam galley. So it's going to hit the main at the same time or even before it would go up to the cam. Because remember, the cam's up this way. And a lot of times the blocks are upside down when people are in their mind thinking about it or looking at it. You have to remember, you gotta go the other way. The cam is up here, the crank's down here, the galley is over here like this. So once it goes in to the main saddle, then it has to go up. But people are saying it's hitting here and then here. It's not. And I'm amazed how many guys are showing it like that. So to kind of show this in a way that it kind of, hopefully it'll make sense, I'm gonna go ahead. There's no cam bearings in this block, and I don't plan on putting any in this block right now for this video. But I'm gonna slide a cam in here anyway. Okay. Don't do this at home. Nah, just joking. So let's just slide a cam in here. Okay, just like that. That's all I'm gonna do. Now, a couple of lifters. All right, here's a couple of flat tappets. I'll just drop them in. Stick one there, maybe one way up here. All right, let's put one way back here. Okay. I'll even throw in, here's some nice Isky solid rollers. Let's see, let me put that in there. Okay, so I got 1, 2, 3, 4, I got 6 lifters in there anyway. Okay, and they're right where that oil galley is, right here. Okay, so now they're saying it has to oil those lifters first before it gets to the main. Now, let's see if I can actually, the oil galleys that we reamed, okay, those were 5/16. That's this size right here. So that's how much oil, that's the size of the galley that goes in, all right? But anyway, if you put this in there, that rod, all the way through. I got the lifters in there. Okay? It's actually bigger than this, but those lifters don't, oh, now I'm not gonna be able to get that out. I didn't hit it hard enough from the backside. Let me see if I get a magnet. Come on, yeah. So, you can slap this all the way through. You'll hear it hit the stand back here. See that? And then, come on. Wish I had a longer piece than it. Okay, now I can go all the way out. There it is. Those lifters are not in the way of the galley. So what I want to do is, if they don't fall out, or I can take the lifters out. Yeah, I'll feel safer since those are not cheap lifters. Let me take these lifters out. The other ones are just mock-up lifters. I'm not worried about those if they decide to fall. Are they gonna fall out? Nope. So they're still in there. Now, what I want to show is, so those 2 lifters are still stuck in there. Here's the reamer that we're reaming with, okay, right here. Now let me get this rod. won't go in. Move this, goes in. Okay? That's because that's where the intersection is. Has nothing to do with the lifters. They're not bothering this thing. It really isn't, because you figure when this system is full and it's got constant oil pressure against it, and everything's moving and releasing and moving, and everything's moving, okay? It's flowing fine. It's got plenty, it's flowing plenty, because this is the only size that goes here. See? So it's fine. And that's why bathtubing your bearing to me is a great idea. So hope some of that made sense. And then they said they clock. This is a long video, isn't it? I got to talking too much. They a lot of guys say that, and it's another thing I want to bring up. I already kind of researched it myself. I went on. People always talk about the cranks are clocked wrong. That Ford didn't clock the crank right. That's why the oil holes, it doesn't oil correctly. Ford, I can't see Ford, engineering all kinds of stuff from Boss 302s to SOC motors, you know what I'm saying, everything else, that they would just not clock a crank right. The crank is clocked fine. I studied the oil port. I watched some videos. One of them was hard to watch. I mean, you have to watch it in a couple different stages, because the guy is real slow talking, let's put it like that. So, but that one there's a lot of that's not very accurate either. And I'm not saying mine is, but what Ford did, they changed the firing order. Okay, if you look at a 289, early 289, 260, a 302 crank, and look at the oiling and where all the oil passages are in the crank and the rods and the mains, they're exactly like a Cleveland. They're exactly like a Tall Deck 400 331M. Okay, but they changed the firing order. So by doing that, it does make some of the holes seem to be off. But you have to remember, there are certain rods that are on the same throw. So when I was watching this one video, they kept talking. They didn't keep talking, but they mentioned how when it fires, okay, it's on compression stroke, and you're like so many degrees from 30 degrees, whatever, and it fires. Well, it's not oiling. Well, that's not the deal. Okay, if you actually think about it and study it, and now see, again, just like everything else, people are just looking at everything not moving. Think about everything moving. Okay, so you have the oiling. So when you backed it up to put the oiling where it's oiling to the, let's say it's oiling in the groove, the rods, okay, the rods were designed to squirt oil on the cylinder walls, or in the wrist pin, even on the cams, they say. Okay, if you look at all that and how it comes out, it needs to be oiling, okay? It needs to already be oiling. Now, as it's coming up, it was flooded with oil, and then some of the rods have another rod, they have 2 rods per throw, and it's already oiling. So it's getting lots of oil, because they'll feed underneath and stuff with your clearance, unless you got some kind of so tight of a clearance it's not even gonna help you. But depending on how you do your build, they're getting lots of oil, okay? And so the oil is actually, really, I like the way it's going, because it's oiling everything, not just right when it fires, because you have to remember, it has an exhaust stroke. So when it has the exhaust stroke, this thing's trying to reach the moon, because there's no compression, but you're oiling. It's not firing, but you're oiling, okay? So that trying, where people are thinking it should fire, it should oil when it fires because you have compression. No, you already saturated the throw. You already saturated the bearing, okay? And it's already putting oil all over the place, and it's going, okay? It's going. And then you have your clearance. So on a compression, it's pushing down. As it's trying to go up, it's pushing the rod down because you're up against compression, which now is opening the top of the bearing, okay? now on the exhaust, it's throwing this way, and so it's opening the top of the bearing. I'm sorry. So when you're pushing down, it's opening the bottom of the bearing that's in the actual cap. I had that backwards for a second. But anyway, so it's that way. But so it's oiling in the cap. So even though you don't have a groove and a lot of bearings in the cap, it's got clearance because it's doing that. So as it's pushing against the cylinder wall this way, it's already opening the clearance and it's putting oil in it. So I sat there and I marked this crank and I did everything. I kept spinning. I spent hours just looking at it, trying to figure it all out, and then realized, hey, these rods also oil. They also did things. So back then, nowadays rods maybe don't oil like that. They just, they rely on the oil that comes out the side and stuff, or maybe something else. And then on exhaust stroke, now it's trying to reach the moon and it's opening the top of the bearing. Okay, but the bottom isn't, but there's no pressure. So no, they get lots of oil, or going back to this plug. Okay, you're plugging this off because they say they had too much oil. Well, why plug it off? We're already complaining there's not enough oil on the rods, but that isn't one of the rods people say they're losing. So they say they go to a full groove bearing. But again, a full groove bearing, you lose a lot of surface. See, I don't run any full groove bearings. I run a half bearing, a half groove, or a 3/4 groove if you can find it. I don't run any full groove, okay? And they say, well, that's why the Boss has the 4 groove, because it's a high RPM engine. Well, the Boss still wasn't rated high RPM from factory, but yes, they did put a full groove in it, but they did that on the 400 also. Look at the 71, or the first or second 400s, right around in there. They came factory with a full groove bearing. And they said and I think they had their theory of strength or something, because it's a heavy piece. It's a lot of mass rolling. So you can look at this any way you want. So the firing order is what really changed, not so much the clocking, which made it seem like it's not clocked. But if you look at and watch that, it's actually oiling fine. So they say the best fix is to buy an aftermarket crank. It cures it. No, I have one here. I set that there. The aftermarket crank is drilled like a small block Chevy. Okay, if you put a small block Chevy, I was using the one out of this motor we're doing. I put his there. I put an Eagle crank next to it, and they are drilled the same. Okay. So, there was a couple of them that were just barely moved over, but it is a bigger main, but it is barely moved over. But if you look at the factory Cleveland, it's actually oiling at a better time because the other one's already way out of it, okay, before the throw gets there, which goes against the theory of the explosion, okay? It almost works backwards. So I don't think anybody's actually researched it super, super, super deep like that one video I watched, but they're forgetting it's oiling constantly. Even when they made it sound like it was opening and shutting. They're like, the port opens, the port shuts, the port opens, the port shuts. No, this thing, when it's going, that oil pressure is always going out, okay? It's always, that's an open hole. It's an open hole. So it's going. Okay, it's flowing, and that thing's just whizzing like this, and yeah, it's got to go up into the rod, but it's not closed. They made it sound more like it shuts off, open, shuts off, shuts on, or starts, off on, off on, off on. No, this thing, you've got constant flow at all time, okay? Because that thing is just spinning, and it's not compression on every stroke, it's every other stroke. And a couple of oil holes are open the same time, and there's rods on the same throw. So it's getting saturated. Then you need the oil to get to the cylinders to lube the skirts and stuff. So I never lost those bearings people talk about, okay? I think people lose those bearings maybe because they run tight clearances and they don't want to run a high volume because they say never do that, and this and that. But when you rebuild a motor that's 50 years old or whatever, you're going to have clearances in the lifter boards and stuff. So you either, if you don't, and I don't like to do the lifter bushings, as I said earlier, so I run a high volume because I know I'm going to have some leaks, and I like to run big clearances on my bearings. Everybody now likes this new oils, they like to run real thin oil, real thin clearances, but yet they want to be able to do a lot of crazy stuff, and they wonder why they're having problems sometimes. Clearances, you know what I mean? So I have no problem with clearances. So, and it made me think of something else, which I got too excited. I already forgot what I was going to say. But anyway, so the oil is constantly moving though. It's not going like this, like you watch some videos and the way they show it, it doesn't, it's, long as that oil pressure gauge has got oil pressure on it, that means it's constantly flowing. And going back to the high volume oil pump, another reason why I like the high volume oil pump is you got to remember your oils at some point can cavitate and they aerate, and they do this and do that, foam and stuff. So that high volume pump, I feel, is going to make sure I'm still getting good oil to these areas because of this other stuff. Because some people say lifters make it foam up or whatever, and then the little rotors in the pump make it do its thing. And then of course it's hitting everything when the crank is spinning, the rods is hitting all the oils and stuff like that. So think about it. So I've never had a problem with the high volume oil pump. And everybody swears you can't, not everybody, I shouldn't say that. I know a lot of people that run high volume oil pumps. But a lot of people say, oh, you don't need them, it's not good. You're gonna break the shaft on the oil pump. Never done that. Never wasted a gear. Okay, never done that. So I believe a lot of stuff is overthinking. All right, so basically I kind of wanted to cover everything, but I'm gonna show more stuff as I'm actually doing builds. But if you're just a basic guy that wants to, it's just a hot street, like I said, and everything, you don't stress out about the oiling, okay? It's not near as bad. Now, if you're a guy that wants to turn 8,500 and 9,000 and this and that, yeah, if you want, go dry sump, or do whatever. And a deep pan is a must. Okay, I will agree with that. That is one of my things I do like, is to run a deep pan. You do want to do that, the sump. So deep pan is something I will agree with. With anybody that says deep pan, I will agree with that. Okay, but I personally don't do any other stuff. Those little oil lines that I do to do the left bank, that's just my doing. Okay, that's really nothing that it's a must. Okay, what I do is I run a plug. This same plug that nobody wants you to do with hydraulic, but instead of that little hole in the center, there's no hole. It's just a set screw with no hole. And I plug off that galley, and I just run my little line to the galley from the front. That's just an old additive thing I've done over the years. I used to do it right here in the front. Come in through I did it right here in the front. I used to come in through the fuel pump block-off plate right here, and run it in here, and then go right in there from this port right here. But it's real tediousy. It's real it's kind of hard to do it because your distributor's right there. So you gotta make sure everything's tilted the right way and clearance. So I just been doing the back again. It's just a little easier just to drill the back and just do the back. But that's just my doing. It's not something that I'm telling people they need to do that. I just like, this is cool. And it oils that left bank, and then puts more oil to the fifth main, because that oil that it takes for the left bank is coming from that same port that fills the fifth main. Okay, so now that it's not taking none, that is a plus, because that fifth main is also oiling the rod. So yeah, so anyway, all these were kind of, and I'll probably talk these subjects as I'm doing a build. If we're in that area, I might bring it up again. But I just wanted to show those reamers for sure, all those holes. And then there's still some holes you need to go in there with your die grinder and your carbide or your cartridge rolls, and you're gonna start getting rid of the sharp edges and but that's a lot of common stuff too that people already knew about. I didn't talk about that, but yeah, there's some of that too that I'll bring up. There's that one breather hole that looks like it's always broke out of these blocks. If you don't have to make it perfect, or I mean, a lot of guys think it's an oil drain. It's really not an oil drain. It sits way up high. It's just more of a vent. Okay, it's a lifter valley vent, or the release pressure, let's say. So, but if it has a little crack in it or something, or some like look like it might flake easy, then I would address that a little bit. We'll talk about that one there too later. But the oiling system is not bad at all on these. They don't oil the cam first. I don't know who started that. Sorry. But as you can see, I put lifters in. I can still run a rod through there. Put the reamer in the port itself, and you can't because that's the intersection. I was just wanting to show because that's where oil's going in, and your oil is always flowing. It's not doing this and then coming back to the front and starting over. It's alive when you're running. It's got pressure. It's flooding the whole time. So you'd be surprised at the little pumps put out. They're crazy. So that's that. It was a very long video, but I just wanted to talk about all that, about different things, like say the crank and just show that stuff. Now, as I'm doing these builds, I can bring that up, but it'll be very short. I can say, okay, remember we talked about these bearings or whatever, and bathtubing the bearing, here's what it looks like, okay, or whatever. So that's that. Now that I've bored you guys with all that, I guess I'll clean up my mess, call it a day. All right, guys, talk to you later. Thanks.